Okay, this is gonna be about a touchy topic about procreation. This is an investigation of the nature of creation, basically, and its efficacy, or is it moral? The whole process of creation itself and procreation. Now, just a caveat or warning here for people who, even people who already have children. I wouldn't feel guilty. But what you should do is submit to your child as an apology for bringing them here if you're interested in these type of ideas, because this is very serious thought for serious thinkers. Anybody else who was turned off by such a concept should just stop the video. But going ahead, this topic has always been touched upon by the wise throughout all ages, because we recognize that this life, this existence down here, I don't care what the fools say about life is good, it's not good. It's birth and death. It's full of vexation, toil, and finally death. And nobody dies in a beautiful way, like the movies where you just go to sleep. Like, there's usually some agonies within there, and it's just the rudeness of it because everything you've done up until that point is just snatched away from you by the Grim Reaper. So this topic is called antinatalism in the Western philosophy world, and is, I don't want to say it's picking up steam because a lot of people aren't even familiar with it. But there's a book came out by David Benatar, Better to Never Have Been Born, if you want to approach it from the intellectual aspect. But you can also go into the Vedas, Buddha, even Jesus talked about it. The fact that it's just better to not be born. I hate to say it. And again, this is not misogyny. Both sexes play a role in procreation. So we don't have to take it from that angle. Um, this is just what I would consider gnosis because we're able to look at the ways of creation from an independent perspective and judge it as being immoral, unethical, unnecessary, and vain. So this is from a book by Rudolf Steiner, a quote here, and he speaks about the beliefs of the ancients. He says, in India, incarnating into a physical body has long been considered a curse, the entering into the veil of tears, which constitutes life. Life is considered the veil of tears, because no matter what you do, I mean, even if it's just losing loved ones or just over caring for loved ones, it's kind of a suffering involved. Like Buddha called it a honey smeared razor blade, and that's really what it is. It's emotional attachment. It's really not good for the spirit. Ultimately, the medieval Cathars saw the body as a pit into which the devil had lowered the souls of weakened angels. Procreation was thus looked upon with horror as an act of unwitting cruelty. Each new birth dragged the heavenly soul into the fallen world of matter, bringing another diabolically corrupt angel into the flesh. So that's how they looked at it. These Cathars are the descendants of the Gnostics, who were the real esoteric original Christians. Because the original teachings of Jesus go in line with Gnosticism, not modern Christianity, which is just idol worship, and actually is Satan worship, because they worship the creator Satan. They don't even know it. So that's how they looked at it, as you're dragging a angel into the fallen world of matter, um, in which that person is really subject to toil, suffering, and death. Now, there's always the argument, like, what about people like Puff Daddy or, people who so-called rich? Now, of course, in my eyes, I don't see a difference because if you really step back, this whole life is it's just not anything to celebrate. I don't care how rich you are. If you have a body, you suffer. I mean, just the fact that you need to be rich should tell you that this state is initially poverty, because for one thing, you're always hungry, dire hungry. I mean, you face death. Hunger can kill you, so you're coming into a state of danger, literally in deficiency. And the question is it necessary to create this need? The answer is no. Now, does it happen? Yes, because it's what nature does. But the point we're trying to make here is that this is unethical at its root from its inception. And I mean, it's downright an evil process. Now, I'm not saying if you have children you're evil. I'm pointing out the ways of the law of nature, which is just unconcerned with the with the created being. It's just a selfish process of replication. Here's a quote from a French writer. It says, to see a recent birth, his body creased, cyanotic, asphyxiated, as the medical literature admits. To contemplate his face labored with cries, his eyes lashed with anxiety, his cheeks raked by tears. Who would doubt that he just went through the equivalent of a beatdown by a horde of cavemen? What sadism for parents to inflict, and full knowledge of the cause. Such mistreatment, such hardships on their dearest. So he's talking about the hells of childbirth, child labor, and that the bloody scene. The baby screaming, fluids everywhere, blood. He's saying, how would you tell the difference between that and someone who just got their ass kicked by a gang of cavemen? So we come into this world screaming. Already a bad sign. Whenever I reflect, my reflecting upon what I suffer only rouses me to blame him that begot me. This is from a Islamic writer. And I gave peace to my children, for they are in the bliss of non-existence, which surpasses all the pleasures of this world. Had they come to life, they would have endured a misery, casting them into destruction and trackless wilderness. So he's calling this trackless wilderness. This world, man, I mean, where are you going? Like, see, nobody even knows what they're doing, especially in the so-called civilized world. You're just being toyed with. I mean, the minds, people just pop out of nowhere. They really don't have any. I mean, there's even a saying, I think the ancient Egyptians said, people don't have a mind. Their mind is given to them. And it really is. I mean, like now we have this money delusion thing, and people think money is really real. It's like this is a very flimsy human mind, and even a flimsy creation. Everyone, all the wise ones tell you it's an illusion. But what I'm pointing to here is it's not a neutral illusion. It's downright cruel, and it's unethical. Procreation is a sin, though not called one. To beget is to increase the sum of evil. It is better for people, instead of multiplying, to perish off the face of the earth. And a lot of people think, well, that's crazy. You mean everybody should just, like it's a just mass destruction, everybody screaming. But even if you think that's crazy, what's ironic is, yeah, but everybody's going to die, though. So, whether it happen at once or not, everyone's going to die. And all we're saying is that if everyone's going to die anyway, the noble thing to do would be to leave this gracefully. Not by killing everybody off, but ideally, if people were to stop the procreation, the will of birth and death would stop. But, of course, they're not that intellectually or spiritually mature to even consider it, which is sad, because they're just going to keep perpetuating this. I guarantee you there's no solution to this world. Even if you get the Illuminati out, you're still living in a state of deficiency. There's going to be problems, and there's going to be wars, naturally. And you could try to evade it and come up with another plan or some excuse, but really, we're just trying to live off this hope drug to just get through another day, but it's bullshit. If you really have compassion and you're really seriously thinking about this, the only way is for the Homo sapiens, the wise ones, to exit gracefully. Uh, to stop perpetuating this world, which is a fallen world. If you can't admit it's a fallen world, you're gonna stay in a fallen world, and you gotta stop blaming the Illuminati. And even now with the flat Earth thing, stop blaming NASA for all the problems. I mean, we were dumb enough to believe we were on a fucking ball. Like, this shit is so stupid anyway. It just shows how silly the human mind is and how flimsy it is. Which brings back to the point. People don't have a mind. The mind is given to them. And this is from Arthur Schopenhauer, one of the greatest geniuses in the Western world the past few centuries. Because he was actually antinatalist. They call him a pessimist. And a pessimist is basically somebody who looks at the world with reality goggles. Optimists are rude because they keep perpetuating the birth and death. That's how we look at it. Because they even call Buddha, and even Jesus will be considered a pessimist if you really get into it. Relative to the world, yeah, you're supposed to be a pessimist. This world, life is not good. That's the most ignorant thing you could say. I heard one guy even tell me, hey, don't worry, everybody's gonna die anyway. Like, how rude. Is that how would you walk up to a starving child? Oh, don't worry, just gonna die anyway. Assholes. You know. So no, optimists are assholes. The ultimate goal of worldly pessimism is a higher spiritual goal. It's not just to say, you know, just die. There is a higher goal. There are higher realms, immaterial realms even. But see, this is part of the ignorance. People don't know that. All they know is the world. And so this is part of this, the programming, the delusion of nature, Maya. That's what they call it. Everyone's fucked up on Maya. And they're paying a penalty for it. So Schopenhauer says, if children were brought into the world by an act of pure reason alone, would the human race continue to exist? Would not a man rather have so much sympathy with the coming generation as to spare it the burden of existence? Or at any rate, not take it upon himself to impose that burden upon it in cold blood? That burden of existence he's talking about. It's done in cold blood. We don't even think about it. You know, we just bring. I mean, you can go to delivery room today, and there's tons of children just popping out. You know, we just. Oh man, it's really ugly because we know that child's going to suffer. That person's going to suffer. I don't care what dreams and goals you have set out for it. Just the mere fact that they have to complete these tasks shows you this is a state of deficiency and suffering that you have to alleviate. And you have something called time whipping your ass too. As working against you. But you're always alleviating this deficiency. There's no profit to be gained in the whole process. You start off in a negative and you're trying to stay at zero. At best. So he says here, for that 1,000 had lived in happiness and pleasure would never do away with the anguish and death agony of a single one. See, he has enough compassion to see this. Now, the average person, they actually don't care, which is really sad. It only points to the point, how cruel this whole thing is. And just as little does my present well-being undo my past suffering. If therefore the evils in the world were 100 times less than is the case, yet their mere existence would be sufficient to establish a truth which may be expressed in different ways, though always somewhat indirectly, the truth that we have not to rejoice but rather to mourn at the existence of the world, that its non-existence will be preferable to its existence, that it is something which at bottom ought not to be. Now, to me, that's real talk. Schopenhauer was actually in line with the teachings of the Buddhas and the Hindus, who basically saw creation for what it was. Mass religion puts this blindfold over you, makes people even dumber than they were initially. Because even in the state of nature, when we look at the tribes in nature, they still have a ignorance about them. They're still under the delusions of Maya too. But I don't think they're as far deluded as someone who enters into mass religion, which is a product of civilization. Because then it really gets stupid. And when you start considering this creation good, like positively a good thing, it really gets dumb. At least the people in the natural state, they just take it for what it is. They don't bullshit as much as we do. And this is about a writer from the 20s, I believe. Her name was Jonah Barnes, and somebody's commenting on her philosophy. Uh, it says Ms. Barnes sees life and the perpetuation of all life as a mistake. Indeed, the mistake is to be alive, and then by procreation to compound that error and produce more tragedy and pain. So she was also an antinatalist because you can't deny it. I don't care what you do, everybody's gonna suffer down here because that's what this place is. It's danger, decay, and death. That's the only end goal of it. This world is not built for humans necessarily. The world is built for itself. Nature lives for herself. It's a selfish thing. And birth equals death. You see, birth is death. You can't have one without the other. I mean, the weirdest thing that people do is celebrate birth and mourn at funerals. I mean, either you're going to celebrate both or mourn both because they're one and the same. And it kind of shows what level we're at as far as wisdom. I mean, how how many years of life will it take you to admit that? I mean, how immature and ignorant this human mind, like, I mean, that's just right in your face and people can't even come to terms with that. You're either going to love the whole thing or despise it and stay away from it. And it's from the philosophy of Samuel Beckett, who was a writer, playwright. He says, "It is the human will that for him is the prime mover towards action, and the human will is evil, leading mankind to evil deeds and the perpetuation through procreation of more evil." So, even Buddha talked about that. Birth is evil. You can't get around it. I mean, just even people, if you eat meat, that's evil. Just the fact that you had to survive and you had to kill something else to survive is an evil action. Does nature condone it? Nature doesn't. See, nature doesn't care. Or, yeah, nature does condone it. Again, that's part of the unethical nature that we're speaking about here. So that act alone is evil. Just because well, I had to eat. Yeah, that's the whole point. You had to commit evil. To give birth to those who can but suffer many years and die, methinks is merely propagating death and multiplying murder. This is from a quote from a script by George Byron in the 19th century. And this is Cicero. "Best by far not to be born, and not to come up against these rocks of life. But if you are born, is it next best to escape, as it were, from the fire of fortune as quickly as possible." That's Cicero. He's a famous speaker. He said it's best by far not to be born. I'm just introducing a lot of people to this thought stream. Because I know some people have probably deep down questioned this process, but just don't know how to articulate it. Since an early age, I've always had a reservation about this process. And the older I get, the more I learn, I find out how divine it is to question nature. People don't realize this. People are so deluded. They think nature is divine. I'm just trying to snap you out of this brainwashing that starts from birth. It's Maya. Maya nature is against the Holy Spirit. Giving life this poison to bring others into this world, into this mess, one needs to be cynical, evil, or stupid. That's from a French writer back in the 60s. These are just some quotes. I'll put a link to this quote page of a lot of antinatalist quotes. You'll be surprised. This is from Gandhi. If destruction is violence, creation too is violence. Procreation therefore involves violence. The creation of what is bound to perish certainly involves violence. So see how nature operates? Nature doesn't care about you. So this whole mother nature crap that's brainwashing because what you're saying, first of all, like I said, you're coming into a state of deficiency. And so listen, Mother Nature stretches the apple for you. You're hungry as eats the apple, and then says, "Oh, thank you, Mother Nature." But why the hell did you need the apple in the first place? You know, that's like Stockholm syndrome, they call it. Some people may know what that's about. Suppose for a moment that all procreation stops. It will only mean that all destruction will cease. Moksha is nothing but release from the cycle of births and deaths. That's the what the Hindu meditators and sages go for. This alone is believed to be the highest bliss, and rightly so. That's Gandhi. So suppose for a moment that all procreation stops, it will only mean that all destruction will cease. The whole goal of the true religion is to stop cycles of birth and death because it's suffering. And I guarantee you, most people listening, at the end of the night, especially, especially after we had our pleasures, and you just sit there thinking about what you had to go through the next day to survive, you probably would rather have decided not to be born if you could. But as I'm saying, you couldn't decide. Um, you're just forced in here. You're forcibly recruited into the world after eons of non-existence as far as your personality goes, as persona, you know, and you weren't bothered in the least bit with non-existence. What you're bothered with is existence, because this is the problem. Do we have the right through procreation to condemn our children to death? And that's another quote. It sounds kind of harsh, but it's true. And I know people, you don't think about it. I was a teenager, a young adult, so I know what it's like. But this is for serious thinkers. If you really want to be a thinker, a thoughtful, compassionate person, you're really gonna have to look at the ways of nature seriously, because we're getting into serious stuff down here, and all I see is people trying to perfect this fallen world, and it's nothing's gonna come of it. I guarantee you. And you can say that's pessimistic all you want, but I guarantee you nothing's gonna change because you're in a state of deficiency. I mean, how good do you think it's gonna get down here? And I just see a lot of people scapegoating the authorities, which is lame. Why are you still dealing with them anyway? Like, let's see, if you really hate Father Government, go live with Mother Nature. But you won't. Why? Because she's vexing as hell. And you would damn near die and suffer in Mother Nature. That's because she's not your mother. And so you rather stay with Papa Government and complain about the government. Now, should you? Yeah. Should we go vote? Sure. Because you had no choice. But that's the whole point. You were thrust into this world, and you're trying to compensate for this suffering. Everywhere you turn, you're trying to compensate for it. You got to go to work. Even if you don't work, you still have to earn money, which is a fiction. So even the people who, well, I'm wealthy and all that, that's fake. That could be taken away from you. You don't own it. And it's still, and so why are you even dealing with these evil monetary people, these evil monetarists in the Illuminati? Just because you're suffering. Just driving home the point. Sleep is good, and death is better yet. Surely never to have been born is best. It's from Heinrich Heine. We procreate sometimes because of a need, sometimes for pleasure. The former is nothing more than slavery, the latter, sadism. But whatever the reason, we only procreate from absolute selfishness. The child is never conceived as an end, but always as a means, which is purely Machiavellian. So that's from Théophile, the French writer, de Girard. I'll send a link to these two for people who are interested in more. Yeah, it's Machiavellian. Like I said, Mother Nature? Yeah, right. No, that's the farthest from the truth. This is dark. It's called Darkness Maya by some of those wise yogis. It's blinding you to the truth. If you really think this is life, and like people, death, and people fear death, like, which is so ignorant because, like I said, you weren't even existing for the longest of time. So to fear death, that's the first ignorance. That's why the Egyptians always, they're always talking about death, or what you call death, but it's really just the realm beyond this place, because this is the true death. Being in body is the real death. They call the body the tomb, the coffin, because that's what it is. It's from Emile Cioran. He was a I forgot what country, but in Europe, and he was also considered a pessimist. He has a lot of quotes. He wrote a lot of books, basically concerning the issue of birth and existence. And his thought process falls in line with gnosis very closely. It says, "What sin have you committed to be born? What crime to exist?" A lot of people in their life always ask, well, "Why was I born?" I see people on Twitter, and a lot of people, they never think about it more than that because they're too busy struggling and toiling. So I know this stuff may sound a little crazy, extreme, and a lot of people are turned off by it, but you have to admit, you asked this question at least once in your life, and nobody answers it because we were programmed by the parenting process. It programs you. It turns you into a fool. This is why Jesus said, "Hate your parents." Now, go kill your parents? No. But to love your parents as being your parents is ignorant, because you'll never understand why you were born, and you're never arrive at the conclusion that well, this is not divine obligation. It takes the burdens off of life. Am I saying go kill yourself? No, you don't have to do that. I know for me, this is very liberating. It takes the pressures out of life because people put a lot of pressure on themselves for no fucking reason. You're born, you're gonna die down here. I don't care what you're doing, so just what the fuck, I mean, why take it so seriously? That's the problem. And like the sages always say, we take the world too seriously. That's the problem. In our very being, what a mistake. What an injury to have adjoined to existence when we might have persevered intact in the virtual, the invulnerable. He's talking about non existence. No one recovers from the disease of being born, a deadly wound if ever there was one. Yet it is with hope of being cured of it someday that we accept life and endure its ordeals. The years pass, but the wound remains. To procreate is to love the scourge, to seek to maintain and augment it. They were right, those ancient philosophers who identify fire with the principle of the universe and with desire, for desire burns, devours, annihilates. At once agent and destroyer of beings, it is somber, it is infernal by essence. He's talking about basically our all our sexual hunger has an end goal. So they say, like some of the saints would even say that, well, sex in of itself is innocent, but see, the goal of lust is to drag another motherfucker down here. And so while we're having all this fun, you don't realize how ferocious it is. I mean, look at this world. Like, take for example, let's say a ferocious lion who devours a gazelle. The ferocity of that. Our impulses are no less ferocious than that. You're on the same world as them. So to think we're doing all good, and, you look around the world and you see all this carnage. No, it's all part of the same carnage. It's just too subtle for you to notice. But the end goal is to drag another soul, being, angel, whatever you want to call it, down here. And so he goes on to say, "Nothing could persuade me that this world is not the fruit of a dark God whose shadow I extend, and that it is incumbent upon me to exhaust the consequences of this curse hanging over him and his creation." And that falls in line with the Gnostics. Like you said, nothing can persuade me that this world is not the fruit of a dark God whose shadow I extend. You really think this world was created by a good God? Like seriously? People trip me out with that. I mean, and across the board, it's just hilarious, man. Like especially these truth seekers who trying to save the world. Nah, this world, man, is inherently malfeasant. It's inherently injustice. It's built into it, injustice. You can't get around it. I mean, just a school shooting is no different from like I see these cats out here screaming and fighting and clawing at each other. It's the same thing. It's both of it is evil. You can't. Well, it's nature, so it's yeah. Think. Like I said, Homo sapiens. Use your wisdom. Think. It's designed this way. Like just admit it. From the atom up, this thing is a crime. There's nothing but crime going on down here. It's vampires. It's selfishness. If attachment is an evil, we must look for its cause in the scandal of birth. For to be born is to be attached. Detachment then should apply itself to getting rid of the traces of this scandal, the most serious and intolerable of all. He's talking about the scandal of birth. This is the scandal. This is where everything starts. This is why, like I said, at some point in your life you ask, why the hell am I here? Why was I born? But then the intoxication of society and everybody around you just swallows up everything, and you just whatever. And by that time, which people just get older and just retire. Um, so in Buddhist writings, mention is often made of the abyss of birth because the Buddhists talk about this. The Buddhists go hard on this too. They're all about gnosis and liberation from this world because they call birth an abyss. An abyss indeed, a gulf into which we do not fall, but from which instead we emerge to our universal chagrin, which is like a disgrace. Everything is wonderfully clear if we admit that birth is a disastrous or at least an inopportune event. But if we think ourselves otherwise, we must resign ourselves to the unintelligible or else cheat like everyone else. Birth and chain are synonyms, or synonymous. To see the light of day, to see shackles. This is Emil Cioran. Not to be born is undoubtedly the best plan of all. Unfortunately, it is within Noah's reach. And there's a final quote from Ken Coates. He wrote a book last 2 years about this topic. Procreation imposes existence on beings who have not chosen to be born. It amounts to a form of enslavement or conscription, which is an immoral act on two counts, violating the autonomy of a potential being and exposing them to pain and suffering. So there you have it, clear cut. Using logic, rationale, morality, ethics. Procreation is an immoral act of nature, and the verdict is guilty. Maya is guilty of this crime. Peace.